Our first coin on the list might look like just another common penny, but don't be fooled. The 1988 no-mint mark Lincoln cent has a secret that could turn what looks like a simple copper-plated coin into a collector's jackpot. Now, picture this. You pull out a 1988 penny. No mint mark under the date, just that familiar image of Abraham Lincoln staring proudly forward. The color might be faded, the edges worn down, even a few scratches here and there. It looks ordinary, right? But under the surface, this little coin hides one of the most fascinating and valuable minting mysteries in modern U.S. coin history. In 1988, the U.S. Mint was preparing new dies for the next year's production, the 1989 cent. Somewhere in that transition, a mistake happened. A small batch of 1988 pennies was accidentally struck with the reverse design meant for 1989. This rare variety became known to collectors as the 1988 reverse of 1989 Lincoln cent, and that's where the magic begins. On the back of the coin, if you look closely, the designer's initials, FG, standing for Frank Gasparo, appear slightly different. The spacing, the shape, the alignment all match the 1989 reverse design instead of the 1988. It's a subtle detail, invisible to most people, but a golden ticket for those who know what to look for. Here's the jaw-dropper. A regular 1988 penny without this error might only be worth 1 cent. Maybe a few dollars in pristine and circulated condition. But if you've got the rare 1988 reverse of 1989 variety, even in circulated or fine condition like the one we're talking about, values can jump dramatically. Some have sold for $3,000 to $5,000 depending on condition, but hold on, in high mint state grades, with sharp details and original luster, collectors have paid over $25,000 for this tiny piece of copper. And here's where it gets even crazier if you happen to find one with a clear strike, full details, and that unmistakable 1989 reverse variety, verified by a professional grading service like PCGs or NGC, the price could soar into the six-figure range. Yes, you heard that right. A penny that could be worth up to $150,000 or more in the right hands. And here's the best part. Many of these coins are still out there, sitting unnoticed in change jars, coin rolls, or tucked away in old collections. That's because, visually, they look nearly identical to every other 1988 penny. Only a trained eye or a little magnification reveals the difference. So, if you have a 1988 Lincoln cent with no mint mark, that means it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Pull it out and take a closer look at the reverse. Compare the shape of those designer initials, FG, and you might just have a piece of minting history worth a fortune. The story of this coin isn't just about money, it's about discovery. It's the thrill of realizing that something so ordinary could hide an extraordinary secret. Imagine showing your friends that you turned a single penny into thousands of dollars. Now, that's the kind of surprise that gives collectors goosebumps. And if you're thinking, come on, how can a single mistake make a penny so valuable? That's the beauty of coin collecting. Each mint error, each design change, each overlooked variation tells a story of human craftsmanship and imperfection. It's history you can hold in your hand. Next up, we're stepping back into the 1970s, a decade of change, style, and incredible hidden treasures in U.S. coinage. And one of the most surprising among them is the 1977 Lincoln cent. You might have hundreds of these lying around, but what if I told you that a simple 1977 penny, especially in fine condition, the one we're looking at, could be worth far more than anyone ever expected? Let's take a closer look. At first glance, this 1977 Lincoln penny looks simple. On the obverse, the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln stares proudly forward. The words, "In God We Trust," arching above, "Liberty" to the left, and that bold date, 1977, right beside his shoulder. No mint mark means it came from the Philadelphia Mint, while those with the tiny D were struck in Denver. Now, 1977 was a special year for collectors. It came just before one of the most famous coin errors in U.S. history, the 1977D double die obverse. This means some pennies that year were struck twice by accident, creating a shadowy doubling effect on the date or the word liberty. Imagine spotting a penny where those letters look ever so slightly doubled. That's your sign that you might have stumbled upon a hidden gem, even without major errors. The 1977 cent holds a fascinating place in U.S. minting history. These coins were part of the last generation of true copper cents, made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. After 1982, the U.S. Mint switched to cheaper copper-plated zinc, making older copper pennies far more desirable to collectors, especially those in clean, fine, or higher conditions. Now, here's where it gets exciting. A typical worn 1977 penny in circulation might be worth just face value, 1 cent. But start moving up the scale to uncirculated condition, and the story changes fast. Clean, bright red examples with full mint luster can sell for $50 to $100. Those graded by PCGs or NGC in Ms. 66 or higher have reached prices around $600 to $1,000. But the real shocker comes with the rare double die varieties. The most famous examples have fetched prices between $5,000 and $12,000 depending on condition. And in the rarest cases, when combined with an off-center strike or a dramatic minting error, values can skyrocket past $50,000 or even $100,000. That's the kind of penny that turns heads at auction. Think about that for a moment. A tiny copper coin minted nearly 50 years ago, hiding a six-figure secret because of a simple twist in the minting press. It's the kind of story that keeps collectors awake at night, checking their pocket change again and again. And here's what makes the 1977 cent so special to search for. Even a fine condition coin can reveal clues. Look closely at the date, especially the 1 and 9. Doubling often shows as a faint shadow just beside those numbers. Also, examine liberty and in God we trust under good light. If you see even the slightest doubling, you might be holding a treasure that's been passed over by thousands of hands without anyone realizing it. Collectors love this year because it represents the perfect mix of nostalgia and rarity. The Lincoln cent had already been around for nearly 70 years by then, and yet, the U.S. Mint was still refining its design and technology, sometimes with small, costly mistakes that would later make history. Moving on, we arrive at 1978, a year that marked the very end of an era for the Lincoln cent. It might not look like much at first, but don't underestimate the 1978 penny. This little coin, especially in fine condition, carries stories of transition, rare mistakes, and collector surprises that can send its value soaring far beyond anything you'd expect from a simple cent. Let's take a closer look. The obverse still features the timeless portrait of Abraham Lincoln, calm, strong, and dignified. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial stands proud, its columns so finely detailed that if you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln sitting inside. It's that kind of craftsmanship that made these older pennies works of miniature art. Now, 1978 might seem like an ordinary year, but it sits right on the edge of one of the biggest changes in U.S. coinage history. Just a few years later, in 1982, the U.S. Mint would switch from solid copper to zinc with only a thin copper coating. That makes every 1978 Lincoln cent one of the last true copper pennies, containing 95% copper, and that alone gives it lasting appeal to serious collectors and investors. But what really makes the 1978 penny fascinating is a small set of rare mint errors that turned a few of these coins into absolute showstoppers. First, there's the 1978 double die obverse, where the date or lettering shows clear doubling, most noticeably on Liberty or the phrase, "In God We Trust." These are dramatic when you see them, with the letters appearing slightly shadowed or thicker than usual. A normal 1978 penny might be worth a cent or two in circulation, but one with this doubling error, even in fine condition, it could sell for $500 to $1,000, and in pristine mint state, prices have hit $7,000 to $12,000 at auction. Then there are the off-center strikes coins that were not properly aligned in the press. Some 1978 cents show partial blank areas or missing details. And depending on how dramatic the error is, collectors have paid $2,000 to $15,000 for unique examples. And the rarest of all? A double-struck 1978 Lincoln cent, struck twice with overlapping designs, once fetched more than $75,000 at auction. But here's where things really get wild. In recent years, sharp-eyed collectors began discovering transitional planchet errors, pennies from 1978, accidentally struck on foreign coin blanks or leftover experimental materials. A few examples struck on 10-cent planchets, thinner, lighter metal, have been authenticated and sold for over $150,000. Yes, one small penny struck on the wrong piece of metal became a six-figure prize. And the shocking truth? Many of these 1978 error coins are still out there, hiding in everyday circulation. You might find one in a roll of old coins from the bank, tucked away in a coffee can, or even in an inherited collection. That's what makes coin collecting so thrilling, the idea that your next discovery might be worth more than you ever imagined. Even if your 1978 penny doesn't have any of those dramatic errors, it's still a collectible piece of history. Copper prices alone make these older cents desirable, and in fine condition, they carry that warm reddish-brown tone collectors love. Over time, the value of these copper coins continues to climb, not just because of rarity, but because fewer and fewer remain in high-grade condition after decades of circulation. Now, hold on to your seats, because this next coin, the 1982 Lincoln cent, is one that changed American coinage forever. And what makes it truly fascinating is that even a worn, bad condition penny from this year could secretly be worth a fortune if it happens to be one of the rare transitional types. At first glance, a 1982 penny doesn't look special at all. Maybe it's dark, scratched, or worn smooth from years of circulation. But what if I told you that this was the year when the US Mint completely changed the metal composition of our 1-cent coin, and that mistake-filled transition created some of the most valuable modern pennies ever struck? Here's the backstory. For decades, Lincoln cents had been made from solid copper, 95% copper, and 5% zinc. But by 1982, copper prices were skyrocketing. The cost of making a penny had nearly equaled its face value, so the mint had to act fast. That year, they began producing new pennies, made mostly of zinc, coated with a thin layer of copper. But here's where things got messy and exciting. During that transition, the mint used both compositions, copper and zinc, in the same year. That means there are 7 different varieties of the 1982 penny, including both large and small date designs from 2 different mints, Philadelphia and Denver. For most collectors, keeping them straight is tricky. But the real jackpot comes from one accidental crossover, the 1982D small date copper penny. It's the one that shouldn't exist, but it does. Somehow, a small batch of Denver mint pennies was struck using the old copper planchets when the switch to zinc had already been made. Only a handful of these have ever been found, and they've rocked the coin world. Every time one surfaces in bad condition, even with heavy wear, this rare variety can fetch $10,000 to $15,000. In higher grades, prices, Sir, one example, authenticated by PCGs, sold for over $18,000, and another in near mint condition reportedly exceeded $25,000. But here's the jaw-dropping part: experts estimate fewer than 20 of these coins exist in any condition. That makes the 1982D small date copper penny one of the rarest and most sought-after Lincoln cents in existence. And in top mint state grades, collectors have whispered about potential auction values reaching $200,000 or more. Now, you might be wondering, how can you tell if your 1982 penny is copper or zinc? It's easier than you think. Simply drop it gently on a hard surface. A copper penny makes a high, ringing sound, while a zinc one has a dull thud. Or, for more accuracy, weigh it. Copper pennies weigh about 3.11 grams, while zinc ones are lighter at 2.5 grams. That small difference could mean the difference between a common coin and a life-changing discovery, even in bad condition. If you've got a 1982 penny that's copper when it should be zinc, or vice versa, you're looking at a hidden treasure. And remember, these mistakes happened when the mint was rushing to adjust machinery and use up old planchets. In the process, they created a modern legend, one that's still out there in pocket change and coin jars across America. Now, get ready, because the 1972D Lincoln penny is where things start to get truly strange. You might think you've seen it all, but imagine this, a penny with not one, but two faces. Yes, you heard that right. Two obverse designs. No Lincoln Memorial on the back. Just Abraham Lincoln staring back from both sides. Sounds impossible, doesn't it? But these so-called double-face error cents are real, and they've become some of the most fascinating and valuable modern errors ever struck by the U.S. Mint. Let's set the stage. In 1972, the Denver Mint produced hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents. The obverse design, created by Victor David Brenner, had been used since 1909. Lincoln's profile surrounded by "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date below. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial, introduced in 1959, replaced the earlier wheat design. Everything about this coin seemed routine until, by pure minting accident, a small number of double obverse two-headed coins were born. So, how does something like this even happen? It's a minting phenomenon so rare it borders on miraculous. A double-face penny occurs when two obverse dies, both intended to strike the front of the coin, are accidentally mounted in the press, one on top and one on bottom. When a blank planchet is fed between them, it gets Lincoln's portrait on both sides, no reverse design at all. These aren't your everyday double dies or weak strikes. This is a full-blown minting catastrophe. And it's the kind of error collectors dream about. Now, here's the part that shocks even seasoned experts. A normal 1972D Lincoln penny in fine condition is worth a cent or two. But a genuine two-headed 1972D, authenticated and confirmed by grading services, has sold for $25,000 to $50,000, even with heavy wear. In higher grades, prices have reached the $100,000 mark. And some specialists estimate that if a perfectly preserved, high-grade example ever surfaced, it could fetch over $250,000. That's right, a single penny, struck twice by mistake, can rival the price of a luxury car or a small home. Now, it's important to mention, there are fakes out there. Some two-headed pennies are made by bonding two normal coins together, one obverse glued to another. But a true mint error has specific characteristics. The alignment is perfect, the metal flow lines are consistent, and the edge shows no seam. That's why professional authentication from PCGs, NGC, or ANACs is absolutely essential. Even in fine condition, a genuine mint-made double-face penny like this one is an absolute showpiece. The coin you're holding, the 1972D, in fine condition may be worn, but that only adds to its mystery. Imagine how many hands it passed through before someone realized both sides were the same face. That's the kind of discovery every collector dreams of, the quiet thrill of holding a mistake so rare it almost shouldn't exist. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. 1972 wasn't just famous for the double obverse error. That year also produced one of the most iconic double-die Lincoln cents in U.S. history, the 1972 double-die obverse. Known for its dramatic doubling on "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," regular examples of that error have sold for $10,000 to $20,000 in high grades. Combine that year's minting chaos with the existence of the two-faced coins, and 1972 becomes one of the most thrilling years ever for penny collectors. Next up, we're heading to one of the most talked about years in U.S. mint history, 1974. The world was changing, and so was America's money. But few people realized that a simple 1974D Lincoln penny, especially one that looks ordinary or worn down, might be connected to one of the most controversial stories in U.S. coinage. Let's paint the picture. The year is 1974. The Lincoln cent still features that classic design, Abraham Lincoln's profile on the front, The Lincoln Memorial on the back, a symbol of American pride and stability. But behind the scenes, something extraordinary was happening at the U.S. Mint. Copper prices were skyrocketing. Making a penny was starting to cost more than 1 cent. Sound familiar? The Mint knew it needed to experiment with cheaper materials. And that's where this story takes an unbelievable turn. In early 1974, the Mint decided to test aluminum as a possible replacement for copper. Thousands of 1974 aluminum cents were struck as trial pieces, light, silvery, and shining like dimes. They looked nothing like the copper pennies we know, and they weighed only about 1/3 as much. But before these new coins could ever be approved, Congress stepped in and shut the project down. Most of those aluminum test coins were ordered to be destroyed, but not all of them were. A handful escaped the Mint, and that's where the legend begins. Now here's where your 1974D penny enters the story. For years, collectors whispered about the existence of a 1974D aluminum cent, a version supposedly struck at the Denver Mint. The U.S. Mint itself long denied that any existed. But then, decades later, a retired Mint employee's son came forward claiming to have won a genuine 1974D aluminum Lincoln cent. If authenticated, that coin would have been one of the rarest modern coins in American history, the only known example from Denver. Experts estimated its potential auction value at $250,000, $500,000, even up to $2 million. But before it could be sold, the Mint stepped in, declaring the coin government property and demanding its return. After a long legal battle, it was seized and vanished into history once again. To this day, no privately owned 1974D aluminum penny has been confirmed, but the mystery remains, and it's given even ordinary 1974D copper cents a special place in collectors' hearts. Now, a standard 1974D penny in fine condition, like the one we're talking about, might look dull, worn, and unremarkable, but don't be too quick to dismiss it. This was a transitional period, and minting experiments were everywhere. Errors like off-metal strikes, clipped planchets, and weakly struck dies have all been documented for this year. Some of these rare mint mistakes have sold for $5,000 to $20,000. Even when heavily circulated, there's also a known 1974D doubled die obverse where Liberty and In God We Trust appear slightly doubled. If you find one of those, even in bad condition, it can bring $150 to $300, and in high grades, up to $2,000 or more. But it's that haunting connection to the aluminum cent that gives every 1974D penny kind of magic. Imagine this. You're holding an old, scratched, copper coin, and somewhere out there, maybe locked in a government vault, sits its mysterious aluminum twin, a coin that never should have existed. Now, rewind to the year 1970, an era of bold change, deep history, and quiet secrets in the world of American coins. The Denver Mint was busy striking billions of Lincoln cents that year, each featuring the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. But somewhere in that massive production, something extraordinary happened, something that turned an ordinary penny into one of the most valuable small coins ever found in U.S. history. The 1970D penny, in fine condition, may seem worn, maybe a little dull from years of use. The copper darkened with time, but don't let that fool you, because this year, this mint, and this coin hold a secret that collectors still whisper about. The 1970S and 1970D double die varieties. Coins so rare that even seasoned experts can go their entire careers without seeing one in person. Let's focus on the 1970D Lincoln cent. While it doesn't carry the fame of the San Francisco version, Denver's mint that year had its share of shocking mint errors and near mythical mistakes. Some examples show strong doubling on the date and the word Liberty, with split serifs visible to the naked eye. Even faint doubling adds tremendous collector value. But here's the real plot twist: there are documented 1970D pennies struck on foreign planchets, including coins intended for countries like the Philippines or Thailand. These off-metal errors are the holy grail for collectors. They weigh differently, and look just a little off, and yet, that tiny mistake can turn a penny into pure treasure. One of these foreign planchet 1970D cents sold for a mind-bending $35,000, and that's just the beginning. There's also the near-legendary 1970D small date and large date varieties. The difference may look minor, but to collectors, it's everything. The small date variety, which shows a 7 that sits slightly lower and slimmer than the 9 and 0, is significantly rarer. In fine condition, even these can be worth $100 to $250, while high-grade examples graded Ms. 66 and above can climb well past $3,000. Now, let's talk about what happens when lightning strikes a 1970D double-struck coin. These occur when the same coin is struck twice by the dies, often leaving overlapping images or ghost-like distortions of Lincoln's face. One stunning example sold for $48,000, and another misaligned, broad-struck piece went for nearly $60,000 at auction. Imagine finding something like that in a roll of old pennies, a simple cent worth more than most people's yearly salary. It's the dream that drives every collector. That one magical discovery that turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. And here's what makes the 1970D penny even more special. It's one of the last years struck with that rich 95% copper composition before the mint began exploring cheaper alternatives. Over time, these copper coins have become miniature time capsules, heavier, warmer, and far more valuable than their modern zinc counterparts. Even if your 1970D is just in fine condition, don't ignore it. Look carefully at the date. Study the 7 and 0. If you notice any doubling, or if the numbers look slightly misshapen or misaligned, you could be holding something truly rare. And if it feels just a bit too light or too heavy, it might be an off-metal strike worth thousands. The most thrilling part. Most of these incredible coins were found not by dealers or museums, but by ordinary people, collectors just like you, checking their pocket change, searching through jars, or sorting rolls from the bank. Next up, we have a coin that marks both a turning point in American minting and a mysterious legacy that continues to baffle collectors to this very day. The 1964 Lincoln cent. At first glance, it looks simple enough. You see Lincoln's timeless profile on the front, the Lincoln Memorial on the back, and that deep copper tone that every older collector remembers from childhood. But beneath that familiar face hides a twist, one that transformed the humble 1964 penny into a coin worth thousands, sometimes even tens of thousands of dollars, depending on its condition and a few rare secrets. Now, let's set the stage. The year was 1964. America was changing fast. The mint was under tremendous pressure because of the coin shortage sweeping across the nation. People were hoarding coins for their metal value, and the government was scrambling to keep up with demand. The result? Over 6 billion 1964 Lincoln cents were struck between the Philadelphia and Denver mints, one of the largest mintages in history. But here's the mystery. In the chaos, a few coins came out different. Even in extra fine condition, a 1964 penny stands out. You can still see the crisp details in Lincoln's beard, sharp lettering on "In God We Trust," and strong lines across the Lincoln Memorial. But what you really want to look for is the 1964 doubled die obverse, a striking error where the date, Liberty, and the motto appear doubled to the naked eye. These rare varieties can send the value soaring. While a regular 1964 penny might only be worth a few cents, a true double die error can reach $10,000 to $25,000, even in circulated grades. But that's not the only surprise from 1964. There are also 1964D pennies struck on silver planchets. That's right, pennies accidentally made from the metal intended for dimes. These weigh less, sound different, and shine with a silvery tone. One of these wild errors sold at auction for over $125,000. Imagine that. A penny mistaken for a dime that could pay off your mortgage. Collectors also watch closely for off-center strikes, die cracks, and clipped planchets from that year. Each of these minting mistakes adds incredible rarity. For example, a 1964D penny struck 40% off-center, sold for nearly $9,000. while another with a major die break across Lincoln's head fetched 12,000. And here's where things get even more intriguing: the transition mystery. Some experts believe there may be experimental strikes of the 1964 penny using early 1965 planchets during testing for new metal compositions. These transitional errors are virtually priceless. Only a handful are known, and they tend to disappear into private collections. Even a flawless, uncirculated 1964 penny, with blazing original red luster and no contact marks, can bring in between $5,000 and $15,000. Depending on grading and color, red, red-brown, or brown are the official tones recognized by collectors. The redder, the rarer, and the more valuable it becomes. Now, here's a fascinating detail for coin enthusiasts: the 1964 penny is made of 95% copper, giving it a heavier, richer feel compared to the zinc-based cents made after 1982. This metal content alone has made collectors hoard them. But it's those tiny differences, the errors, the doubling, the foreign planchets that elevate this coin from ordinary to legendary. Think about it. A coin millions of Americans once carried every day, sitting in pockets, vending machines, and savings jars, now potentially worth a small fortune if you've got the right one. That's the thrill of numismatics. That's why every old penny deserves a second look. Now, take a close look at that 1974 Lincoln penny in your hand. Notice that deep, dark tone, the almost chocolate brown copper surface, dulled over time, but still holding a certain shine under the right light. You might think it's just a well-worn cent, nothing special. But what if I told you that hidden among these dark, ordinary-looking pennies are coins that have sold for over $2,000? Rewind to the mid-1970s, a time when inflation and rising metal prices were hitting hard. The U.S. Mint was facing a major problem. Copper had become expensive, and the cost of making a 1-cent coin was dangerously close to exceeding its face value. So in 1974, the Mint began an extraordinary experiment. They started striking aluminum pennies. Yes, real aluminum 1-cent coins. Over 1 million of these prototype coins were produced at the Philadelphia Mint. They were light, silver-colored, and unlike anything Americans had ever seen. But before they could go into circulation, Congress stepped in. Lawmakers worried that the coins wouldn't show up on vending machines or X-rays, and the project was suddenly scrapped. The Mint ordered every single aluminum cent to be destroyed. But here's where the legend begins: a handful escaped. A few of those 1974 aluminum cents were handed out to officials and congressmen during demonstrations, and at least 1 or 2 were never returned. Those coins became the stuff of numismatic folklore, coins so rare and controversial that the Secret Service actively hunted them down. To this day, only 2 confirmed examples have surfaced, and the Mint still considers them government property. One of these aluminum 1974 Lincoln cents was once valued at over $250,000, and its whereabouts remain shrouded in mystery. Now, back to your 1974 dark copper penny. Even those can hide valuable surprises, because that same year, both Philadelphia and Denver mints were striking billions of regular copper cents, and a small number of them contain remarkable mint errors and varieties. Collectors have found double die obverses where the word liberty and the date show clear doubling, and others with dramatic off-center strikes where part of Lincoln's face is missing or shifted. A 1974 Lincoln cent with a major double strike once sold for $8,500, while another with a broad strike error went for nearly $10,000. But there's another reason your coin's dark color might be more than just age. It could point to a unique planchet composition or exposure to unusual conditions during minting. Some 1974 cents have been discovered struck on bronze planchets intended for earlier years, or even on foreign coin blanks. These off-metal strikes can easily fetch $15,000 to $40,000 at major auctions. And here's the real kicker: the 1974 aluminum cent. For decades, collectors debated whether one truly existed. Then, in 2014, A father and son in California discovered one in an old coin collection. The coin weighed just 0.93 grams, exactly what an aluminum cent should weigh. Experts authenticated it, and its estimated auction value skyrocketed past $2 million before the mint claimed ownership and stopped the sale. That's right, one penny, worth more than a mansion, locked away forever. So, when you hold your dark-colored 1974 penny, remember, that tone could be telling a story. Maybe it sat in an old jar for 50 years, gathering patina. Or maybe, just maybe, it's one of those experimental planchets that slipped through the cracks of history. Either way, it's part of one of the most fascinating chapters in American minting, when the government almost replaced copper with aluminum, and a few cents became priceless treasures. Now, take a moment and imagine pulling out an old 1973 Lincoln penny from your collection. You see that deep copper tone, maybe some light wear around the rim, and a gentle sheen across Lincoln's portrait. To most people, it's just a penny. But here's the truth. This little cent could be hiding one of the greatest untold stories in U.S. mint history, a story that nearly changed the face of American money forever. In 1973, America was in the middle of a coinage crisis. The cost of copper was rising, and the U.S. Mint was desperate to find cheaper materials to make pennies. Sound familiar? It's the same problem they'd face again in the 1980s. But this was the first major warning shot. The Mint began running secret tests for alternative metals. Aluminum, steel, even bronze-coated zinc planchets were being considered. Most of those tests were done the following year, in 1974. But few people know that the groundwork for that entire experiment began in 1973. If your 1973 penny is in fine condition, it shows the signs of time, but still carries crisp details. Lincoln's hairlines, the motto, "In God We Trust," and the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse are all visible. That alone makes it collectible for its classic pre-1982 95% copper composition, heavier and richer than modern pennies. But here's where things get exciting and shocking. There are 1973 Lincoln cents struck on experimental planchets that shouldn't exist. Some examples were minted on brass blanks meant for foreign coins, others on aluminum or steel test planchets from the mint's early material trials. These coins are almost impossible to identify at first glance unless you weigh them. Aluminum versions are dramatically lighter, around 1 gram, instead of 3.11 grams. If one of these ever surfaces in public hands, it could easily command $100,000 to $250,000, maybe more. Even regular 1973 pennies have their secrets. Certain double-die obverse varieties show strong doubling on the date and lettering, most notably on the Liberty and "In God We Trust." These are so rare that most collectors have never seen one in person. A high-grade double-die 1973 penny once sold for over $8,500. And even lower-grade examples are still highly sought after. Then there's the 1973 proof penny struck only at the San Francisco Mint in limited quantities for collectors. While proofs are usually pristine, a few have surfaced with dramatic mint errors, off-center strikes, die clashes, and cameo contrasts so strong they shimmer under light. Some of these ultra-rare 1973 proofs have sold for $10,000 to $15,000. Depending on the depth of contrast and condition. But here's the real jaw-dropper: a handful of 1973 Lincoln cents were accidentally struck on planchets intended for foreign coins, including blanks meant for countries like Jamaica and the Philippines. These off-metal errors are among the rarest of all Lincoln cent mistakes. Imagine a U.S. penny struck on a coin blank meant for another country. That's the kind of mistake that drives collectors wild. One of these exotic errors sold for over $60,000, all because of a single minting mix-up. Now, your coin, the 1973 fine condition penny with its darker tone and visible wear, still carries weight in the collector market. In its current condition, it might fetch a modest amount, but the excitement comes from what it might be. Because if it shows any signs of doubling, a lighter weight, or that telltale silvery or brassy color, you might just have a hidden treasure in your hands. Let's begin with our first coin, the 1968 Lincoln penny. At first glance, it looks like any other old cent you might find at the bottom of a drawer or tucked away in an old coffee can. But take a closer look, because this unassuming little coin has shocked collectors more than once, especially when it appears in extra fine condition. Just like the one you see here, the 1968 penny carries more mystery than most realize. It was struck during a time of transition. The U.S. Mint had just removed the mint mark from coins in 1965. And by 1968, those tiny letters returned, D for Denver, S for San Francisco, and sometimes, none at all for Philadelphia. What many don't know is that 1968's proof pennies and certain Denver-struck circulation coins came out with subtle, but powerful errors: double dies, misaligned mint marks, and variations in the thickness of the lettering. These differences may seem small, but in the world of coin collecting, they can mean the difference between 1 cent and a small fortune. Now imagine holding a 1968 penny that gleams with nearly all its original copper luster, sharp edges, and crisp detail around Lincoln's profile. That's what extra fine means. It still has the texture and brilliance that most coins of its age lost decades ago. And that's exactly what makes this one so special. You can still see the fine detail in Lincoln's beard, the boldness of the date, and that iconic "In God We Trust" standing proud across the top. Here's where things get exciting. A 1968's Lincoln penny with a strong double die obverse, meaning the date and lettering are doubled, once sold for over $30,000 in near perfect condition. Even the circulated versions with that same doubling have brought in several $1,000s at auction. Collectors are obsessed with these subtle errors because they capture a tiny moment of human imperfection in the mint's long history. But even without an error, a 1968 Lincoln penny in extra fine condition can surprise you. Clean, well-preserved examples, especially those with rich, red copper tone and minimal marks, have been valued between $150 and $450, depending on grading and toning. Step it up to uncirculated red examples, and you're looking at $1,000 to $3,000. And if you happen to find a proof strike or rare error version hiding in your collection, the value can skyrocket well beyond $25,000, and in some reported private sales, even past $40,000. That's right, a single penny worth more than a brand new car. Hard to believe, but it's true. So, how can you tell if your 1968 penny could be the one? Start by checking under good lighting. Focus on the date and the word liberty. If you see even the slightest doubling or an off-centered strike, your heart might just skip a beat. Look for that San Francisco mint mark, the tiny S, especially one that appears crooked or faint. Those are the kind of details collectors chase like hidden treasure. The story behind these coins connects us to a fascinating era in U.S. mint history. The late 1960s were filled with experimentation and mechanical inconsistencies as mints adjusted to new processes. Every coin struck during that time carries a fingerprint of that change. And sometimes, those fingerprints turn out to be worth a fortune. So, before you cash in that jar of old pennies, take one more look. That 1968 cent might not just be copper. It could be your ticket to something truly unbelievable. Next up, we've got a coin that hides one of the most surprising stories in the entire Lincoln series, the 1963 Lincoln penny. Now, before you scroll past thinking, oh, that's just another common wheat era cent, stop right there. Because this one might just blow your mind. The 1963 penny was struck in the final full year before America said goodbye to the beloved wheat. Reverse design, a design that had defined the Lincoln cent for over half a century. Denver struck more than 1.7 billion of them that year. Yes, billion with a B. But here's the twist. Even with such massive numbers, certain 1963 pennies have stunned collectors with shocking values, especially when preserved in extra fine or red uncirculated condition. Picture this: the coin gleaming softly, the deep copper tone still alive, with Abraham Lincoln's portrait showing only the faintest touch of wear on his cheek and jawline. That's the kind of coin serious collectors dream about finding, especially when the surfaces remain smooth and the strike sharp. And if your 1963D penny looks anything like that, well, don't let it go. You see, during that period, the Denver Mint was running at full capacity. The presses were moving fast, and small imperfections began slipping through. That's when we see the occasional die clash, ray-punched mint marks, and even double die obverses that were never meant to exist. A few of these rare varieties have made their way into collections and auctions, where prices quickly jumped from a few dollars to staggering sums. One particularly sharp 1963D penny with a bold double die obverse and ray-punched D mint mark was once graded by PCGs at near perfection, and that tiny cent sold for over $25,000. That's $25,000 for a single penny. Most people wouldn't even glance at twice. Now, if you have one in extra fine condition, with that strong reddish copper tone and sharp rim definition, you're already in rare company. Such examples often fetch $150 to $500, and uncirculated red specimens can go for $2,000 to $6,000, sometimes more, if they exhibit a dramatic die error. But here's where it gets jaw-dropping. Certain pristine, full red examples graded Ms. 67 or higher have been auctioned for more than $40,000, and private sales have even whispered numbers touching the $75,000 mark. It's almost unbelievable. A coin that once bought a stick of gum now worth more than a luxury watch. But what makes it truly fascinating is its place in history. The 1963D penny was minted at the end of an era, a final farewell to the wheat reverse, right before the mint introduced the Lincoln Memorial design in 1959. It's like a time capsule of American change, sitting quietly in your hand. So, if you come across one that's got a bright red-orange glow, crisp details in Lincoln's hair, and that tiny D below the date, stop and check carefully. Look under magnification for a ray-punched mint mark, a doubled Liberty, or a faint die crack running across the coin's surface. Those little imperfections can turn your penny into something truly extraordinary. And remember, collectors pay big money for history, condition, and rarity all rolled into one. The 1963D penny has all three, and when preserved this well, it transforms from ordinary pocket change into a little piece of American treasure. Moving on, let's talk about a coin that hides in plain sight, the 1981 Lincoln penny. Now, most people overlook this one completely. It doesn't seem ancient, it doesn't have the wheat reverse, and it's from the early 80s, a time most collectors don't immediately associate with big money. But that's exactly what makes this coin so dangerous to ignore. Because the truth is, some of these 1981 cents are worth far more than you'd ever expect. Let's start with what makes it special. The 1981 penny marks the final year the U.S. Mint struck Lincoln cents in nearly pure copper, that's 95% copper, before switching to the copper-plated zinc planchets in 1982. This transition changed everything. Collectors today know that these late copper issues have become increasingly desirable, especially as the years go by and fewer survive in high quality. Now, your coin, the one in fine condition, might not shine like new, but don't be fooled. Even circulated examples from 1981 can hide fascinating details, especially when it comes to die varieties and mint mark errors. The most sought after of all is the 1981S Type 2 proof, recognized by its sharply defined S mint mark, one that looks clear, polished, and elegant. That single design change has turned certain proof coins into five-figure treasures, but even standard business strikes can hold surprises. Some 1981D coins have been discovered with minor doubling on the obverse, especially around the date and the word Liberty. These double die varieties, while subtle, can push a penny's value from just a cent to hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on condition. Now, let's talk numbers, because that's where things get wild. A standard 1981 penny in fine condition, like yours, generally trades for around 10 to 25 cents, a modest start. But move up the scale to extra fine or about uncirculated and values climb to $1 to $5. Then comes the leap, bright red. Uncirculated examples can easily bring $50 to $200. And if you're lucky enough to have a perfect Ms. 67 red copper strike, you're looking at as much as $7,000 to $12,000. And here's where the collector's hearts start racing: those rare proof examples from San Francisco. With that crisp Type 2S, one of these, in flawless PR70 condition, has sold for more than $40,000. That's right, a single 1981 penny, worth more than a diamond ring, because of one tiny design detail and a perfect strike. But why does this coin matter so much? Because 1981 was the end of an era. It represents the last breath of true copper in the Lincoln cent, a turning point in American coinage history. Every one of these coins tells the story of changing times, shifting metal values, and the slow fading of an American classic. If you've got one sitting in a jar, especially if it looks a little darker or heavier than newer pennies, it's worth checking. Take it under a magnifying glass. Look closely at the date, the D or S mint mark, and even the surface texture. If it weighs 3.11 grams, you're holding real copper, not the cheap zinc-plated kind made after 1982. And that makes it far more desirable to collectors and investors alike. The best part: many people still don't realize how collectible these pre-1982 copper cents are becoming. Entire rolls of them are being bought up and hoarded by savvy collectors. And the finest examples, especially those with rare die characteristics, are being locked away in private collections forever. So next time you see a 1981 penny, don't just pass it by. That humble cent could be the last of its kind, and in the right condition, it could easily be worth thousands. Now, let's turn our attention to a coin that quietly hides among billions of others, the 1975D Lincoln penny. Most people would look at this little coin and think, just another cent from the 70s. But those who know the secrets of the US Mint understand something far deeper. Beneath that dull copper surface lies one of the most fascinating mysteries of modern coinage, and a few rare survivors that have left collectors absolutely speechless. The year may 1975 seem ordinary, but it came right before one of the most monumental changes in US coin history, the bicentennial year. As the mint geared up for new designs and commemorations, errors began creeping in during late 1974 and 1975 production runs. Denver, known for high volume output, struck over 4.5 billion Lincoln cents that year. And with that sheer volume came the opportunity for rare mistakes. If you have a 1975D penny in fine condition, like the one we're looking at now, pay attention, because while the coin might look modest, there are hidden details that could make it far more valuable than you'd ever expect. Start with the surface. Even in fine condition, you can still see Lincoln's outline clearly, with the date 1975 sitting bold under his shoulder. The D mint mark, punched by hand back then, often shows slight doubling or misalignment, and that's exactly where the treasure hunt begins. Some 1975D pennies have been discovered with ray-punched mint marks, faint doubling on the word Liberty, or tiny die cracks near Lincoln's coat. These small minting quirks are pure gold for collectors. Now, here's where things get really exciting. A 1975D penny with a strong doubled die obverse once shocked the auction world when it sold for over $35,000. Yes, $35,000 simply because of its rare minting error. Even coins with milder doubling or die breaks can fetch hundreds to several $1,000s, depending on how clearly the error shows and the overall condition. But even without any mint mistake, high-grade examples of the 1975D penny can be surprisingly valuable. In fine condition, like yours, these coins typically range from 10 cents to $1, but move up the ladder to extra fine or uncirculated red, and you're looking at $50 to $400. And if you somehow find a full red example graded Ms. 67 or higher, collectors have paid $6,000 to $10,000, sometimes even more, in private sales. Why? Because 1975 was the end of an era. It was the last normal year before the mint started experimenting with massive design changes for the nation's 200th birthday. Every 1975 coin captures that still moment before transformation, before history took its next big step. That's what makes it so deeply collectible today. Now, here's the hidden gem. A few known 1975D Lincoln cents have been found struck on foreign planchets, blank metal discs meant for coins of other countries. These off-metal errors can weigh less, sound different when dropped, and even look slightly off-color. One such piece, struck on a planchet meant for a 10-cent Avo coin, sold for nearly $50,000 at auction. Imagine finding one of those in a box of old change. So before you dismiss that dull-looking penny from 1975, take a closer look. Check the edges, the lettering, and especially that tiny D. Use a magnifying glass and a good, like the kind of careful look that could turn a single cent into a life-changing discovery. And that's the beauty of coin collecting. It's not just about money. It's about history, luck, and the thrill of the unknown. You never really know what's hiding in your hands until you look close enough. And now, we've saved one of the most surprising coins for last, the 1971 Lincoln penny. At first glance, this coin looks completely ordinary, almost too ordinary. But don't let that fool you, because hidden among those billions of pennies from 1971 is one of the most legendary modern coin errors ever discovered. A mistake so bold, it turned an everyday cent into a jaw-dropping collector's treasure worth more than most people's cars. The story of the 1971 penny begins at the Philadelphia Mint, where the presses were running non-stop. Over 1.9 billion of these coins were struck, each one carrying Abraham Lincoln's familiar face on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. To most Americans, it was just another coin for vending machines and pocket change. But somewhere along the way, something extraordinary happened. One was engraved incorrectly, and when it struck the planchets, it left behind a dramatic doubled image on the front of the coin. The date, the letters in Liberty, even the phrase, "In God We Trust," all appear slightly duplicated, bold, clear, and unmistakable. It became known as the 1971 double die obverse, one of the most famous error coins in modern U.S. history. Now, here's where it gets exciting. The vast majority of 1971 pennies are worth face value, even in fine condition, about 1 cent. But if you happen to spot one of these double die varieties, your heart might skip a beat. Even worn, circulated examples have sold for $800 to $1,500. Move up to extra fine or about uncirculated, and values surpassed $5,000, and in pristine mint state red condition, graded by PCGs or NGC. These coins have shattered records, with top examples fetching more than $30,000. That's $30,000 for 1 penny. Even without the famous doubling, the 1971 penny still carries intrigue. It represents the early years of the Lincoln Memorial design, a time when the mint was perfecting new engraving techniques, adjusting press pressures, and struggling with die wear that often led to faint details and ghost-like textures. Every coin from that year tells a story of experimentation and subtle imperfection. If your 1971 penny is in fine condition, like this one, the wear is noticeable but gentle. Lincoln's portrait is still clear, the rim mostly intact, and the lettering legible. It may not seem like much, but these coins are now over 50 years old, and the number of well-preserved examples is dropping fast. For collectors who specialize in transitional era coins, even modest examples hold historical charm. But here's the real thrill: some 1971 cents were struck on foreign planchets or lightweight blanks intended for smaller denominations. These oddities, when authenticated, have sold for $10,000 to $45,000, depending on condition and metal content. That's right, the wrong piece of metal, at the right moment in the mint, can change everything. So how do you know if you've found something special? Hold the coin under a bright light. Look closely at the date, especially the 9 and 1. If you see a second shadow or a doubled outline, you might just be staring at a treasure. Then check the weight. A standard copper 1971 penny should weigh 3.11 grams. Anything lighter or off color deserves a second opinion. And here's the best part: these coins are still out there. hiding in old coffee cans, dusty jars, and forgotten drawers across America. Every time someone takes a closer look at an old penny, there's a tiny chance they'll uncover one of the great minting mistakes of our time. That's what makes coin collecting so powerful. It's not just about money. It's about discovery, history, and the thrill of realizing that a simple penny might hold a secret worth thousands. So, before you roll up those jars of change or spend that handful of pennies, take one more look. Because, as you've seen today, from 1968 to 1971, ordinary coins can hide extraordinary value, thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. The year was 1969, a time of change, hope, and history in the making. But while America was looking to the moon, the U.S. Mint in San Francisco was striking a few tiny copper coins that would someday leave even veteran collectors speechless. I'm talking about the 1969 Lincoln cent. And if you have one even in extra fine condition, you might be sitting on a small fortune without realizing it. At first glance, this penny looks ordinary. You see the familiar bust of President Abraham Lincoln, facing right, the motto "In God We Trust" proudly above his head, and that small S mint mark below the date. The reverse shows the iconic Lincoln Memorial, simple, strong, familiar. It's a coin you've seen millions of times. But this little copper piece hides a mystery that shook the numismatic world and turned ordinary pocket change into a six-figure legend. The story begins when collectors started noticing something odd about certain 1969s pennies. The letters "In Liberty" and "In God We Trust" looked doubled, as if the coin had been stamped twice, ever so slightly off. It wasn't a trick of the eye, it was a true double die obverse, one of the rarest and most dramatic minting errors ever discovered. At first, even the Secret Service thought these coins were fakes. They confiscated them, believing counterfeiters were behind it. But tests proved otherwise. These pennies were real, genuine mint errors, struck in San Francisco under the official presses of the U.S. Mint itself. Now here's where it gets unbelievable. A normal 1969s penny in extra fine condition might fetch you a few cents, maybe a few dollars if it's a solid example. But if you spot that doubling on the date, the word "Liberty," or the motto above Lincoln's head, you're looking at one of the most valuable modern coins ever made. Back in 2018, one of these 1969s double die cents sold for over $126,000 at auction. Another, with near-perfect red color and flawless surfaces, crossed $150,000. And an uncirculated example, graded by PCGs as Ms. 64 Red, shocked everyone when it fetched more than $500,000. That's $500,000 for a single penny. Think about that for a moment, a 1-cent coin turning into $500,000. Simply because of a minting accident you could barely notice with the naked eye. That's why collectors still hunt these every single day. You can find guides and photos online, but the simplest trick is this. Look carefully at the date, 1969. If those numbers look thicker, almost shadowed, and the letters of Liberty seem doubled, don't spend it. Protect it, get it graded, and hold on tight. Because you might just have found a coin that could rewrite your story. In an extra fine condition, a 1969s double die can bring $35,000 to $75,000, depending on color, luster, and clarity of the doubling. And if yours has the rich, reddish copper tone, collectors call it red or red-brown, the value skyrockets even more. Imagine paying your mortgage, buying a new car, or taking that dream vacation all from a single penny that's been hiding in your collection for decades. But here's the twist most people don't know. Not all doubling on 1969 pennies is real. Some are machine doubling, caused by vibration or bounce during striking. Those are worth pennies. But the true doubled die obverse has thick, rounded letters and clear separation, especially in Liberty and the motto. That's the key difference that makes or breaks a fortune. Collectors still whisper about this coin because it represents something magical, the idea that even in something as small as a penny, history can hide an accident so powerful it changes everything. So next time you see a 1969 Lincoln cent, look closer. Under that worn copper surface might be the rarest kind of mistake, the kind that turns the ordinary into a treasure. And remember, we're just getting started, because the next Lincoln penny on this list might surprise you even more. A coin so rare, even lifelong collectors have never seen one in person. Next up, we travel 15 years ahead, to the year 1984, a time when copper was giving way to zinc. The Cold War was still icy, and no one knew that a tiny, invisible mistake at the US Mint would create one of the most bizarre and valuable pennies in modern history. The 1984 Lincoln cent may look completely normal to the untrained eye, but beneath its simple copper tone lies one of the most talked about minting mysteries of the decade, the famous 1984 doubled ear penny. At first glance, it's just another penny. You see Lincoln's familiar portrait, the words, "In God We Trust," arching across the top, and "Liberty" pressed clearly to the left. Everything looks the same, until you look closely at Abraham Lincoln's ear. Because on some of these coins, you'll notice something truly strange: a second earlobe, just below the first one. That's right, a doubled ear. This doubling isn't light. It's not subtle, and it's definitely not a trick of the light. It's a true double die error, meaning the die, the metal stamp used to strike the coin, accidentally impressed Lincoln's portrait twice, slightly misaligned. The result? A ghostly second ear, perfectly visible and incredibly rare. When this error was first discovered in the mid-1980s, collectors could hardly believe it. Some dismissed it as fake, others as minor. But as more authentic examples surfaced, certified by the Professional Coin Grading Service and ANAX, the legend of the 1984 doubled ear Lincoln cent was born. Now, let's talk numbers, because this is where things start to get thrilling. A regular 1984 penny, even in extra fine condition, is worth about 1 cent, maybe a few cents to a roll hunter. But the 1984 doubled ear penny in extra fine condition can bring $250 to $500, and in higher grades, $1,500 to $3,000. That's already impressive. But the real shocker comes when you find one in brilliant, uncirculated, mint red condition. Those have sold for as high as $18,000, and some estimates suggest that an untouched, flawless example could break $25,000 or more in a major auction. Imagine pulling one from a jar of old change, a penny from your childhood, a coin that's been sitting unnoticed for 40 years, and suddenly realizing it's worth more than your first car. That's the kind of magic this hobby brings. The key to spotting this hidden treasure lies in that ear. Take a magnifier or a jeweler's loupe and look closely at Lincoln's jawline. You'll see a faint, curved shape just below the ear. That's the second earlobe. Real doubling shows smooth, rounded shapes, not sharp, flat lines like machine doubling. The difference might look small, but it makes all the difference between a penny and a payday, even in extra fine condition. With light wear on Lincoln's cheek and beard, but clear features overall, this coin can be a serious collector's prize. The richer the copper tone, the more appealing it looks to serious buyers. And if it's the red-brown variety, that beautiful warm copper glow, it can command prices that would make anyone stop and stare. But there's another layer of mystery here. The 1984 double ear isn't known from all mints. It was struck only at the Philadelphia Mint, which means no mint mark under the date. That detail alone helps narrow down the search. So if you find a 1984 penny without a mint mark, flip it over, examine that ear, and if you see that strange double shape, don't spend it. Protect it. You may have just found one of the most fascinating Lincoln cents of the 1980s. Coins like this remind us that not all treasures shine in gold or silver. Some are copper, small, and hiding in plain sight. The 1984 doubled ear Lincoln cent proves that even the tiniest minting error can turn a simple penny into a conversation piece worth thousands. So, the next time you empty your pocket change, don't rush. Take a moment, look closer, because sometimes fortune hides right under your fingertips, in the shape of a doubled ear on a coin you've seen your whole life. Moving on to the next treasure, we travel back once more, this time to 1970. A year when the world was changing faster than ever. The Beatles had just broken up. Gas was 36 cents a gallon, and in Denver, Colorado. The U.S. Mint was quietly striking a coin that would later become one of the most hunted Lincoln cents of all time. The 1970D Lincoln penny. At first glance, it looks like just another penny. The D mint mark sits proudly beneath the date, marking its Denver origin. Lincoln's calm, thoughtful profile stares to the right, surrounded by the motto, "In God We Trust," and the familiar word, "Liberty," on the back. The Lincoln Memorial still stands, crisp and classic. But for those who know where to look, the 1970D hides a story that only true collectors can appreciate. A story of tiny details, big mistakes, and shocking value. You see, the 1970D penny doesn't owe its fame to a double die or dramatic misstrike. Its mystery is subtler, and it's tied to an overlooked variety that only seasoned eyes can catch. The small date vs. large date difference. Most people have never noticed it, but the mint actually used two different date styles when producing 1970 Lincoln cents: a large date and a small date. And while both were made in San Francisco, a few subtle date style errors also appeared in Denver issues, sparking decades of curiosity among collectors. Now here's where it gets fascinating. In fine condition, a standard 1970D penny might only be worth a few cents. But if you happen to find one with unusual die features like misaligned strikes, doubled mint marks, or even faint traces of die deterioration, doubling your coin's value could rise dramatically. A simple circulation find could jump from pocket change to hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Depending on the error, collectors especially prize coins with the RPM error, that stands for repunched mint mark. During 1970, the Denver Mint used hand-punched mint marks, meaning the D was applied separately to each die. Sometimes, the mint worker didn't align it perfectly, leading to a faint shadow D just above or beside the main one. Those are called 1970D RPM varieties, and they can be worth a surprising amount. Even in fine condition, one of these could bring $150 to $300, and in uncirculated red condition, you're looking at $1,000 to $2,500. But there's more. A few rare off-center 1970D pennies where part of the design is missing because the coin wasn't seated properly during striking have sold for $5,000 or more, depending on how far off the strike is. Add a double strike or partial collar error, and you're talking about values that can reach $15,000, even $20,000 for a coin that started as 1 cent. Imagine that: a fine condition penny, brown with age, a little wear on Lincoln's cheek and beard, yet hiding an error that could pay your rent for months. That's the beauty of this hobby. The tiniest imperfection can transform a common coin into a collector's dream. Even more amazing, a handful of 1970D Lincoln cents struck on foreign planchets, blank coins meant for other countries, have been discovered. One was struck on a thinner aluminum planchet intended for a 1 cent of O coin, and it sold for over $25,000 at auction. Another, struck on a bronze planchet, sold for $35,000. These were pure minting accidents, and they prove that anything's possible when it comes to U.S. coinage. Now, in fine condition, your 1970D might not look flashy. Light wear, smooth surfaces, and a soft brown patina. But even so, it's worth examining closely. Look under magnification at the mint mark. Search for doubling, repunching, or off-center details, because you might be holding a small piece of minting history. One of those rare errors that slipped quietly through quality control, only to resurface decades later in the hands of a lucky collector. And if you think the 1970D can't surprise you any further, remember this: an uncirculated example with the dramatic RPM sold for over $4,800 in a heritage auction. A penny worth less than a cent to the government, now valued like a gold coin to collectors. That's the power of rarity, and the thrill that keeps treasure hunters searching roll after roll, year after year. Now, let's rewind to 1964, year that marked the end of an era in U.S. coinage. The nation was mourning the loss of President Kennedy. Silver coins still jingled in every pocket, and the mint was racing to keep up with an America that couldn't seem to get enough change. But deep inside the Denver Mint, something unexpected was happening. Among billions of ordinary copper pennies struck that year, a handful were created with flaws, varieties, and mysteries that collectors still talk about today. This is the story of the 1964D Lincoln penny, a coin that looks simple until you really look closer. At first glance, the 1964D cent feels like just another piece of nostalgia. It's got that rich copper tone, the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln facing right, the tiny D mint mark just beneath the date, and on the reverse, the proud Lincoln Memorial standing tall. But what makes this year fascinating is not just its design. It's the chaos that happened behind the scenes at the mint. In 1964, the US was facing a massive coin shortage. Demand was skyrocketing, and the mint was under pressure to strike as many coins as possible. Fast. Dies were overused, mint marks were hand-punched, and quality control was stretched to the limit. And that's when the mistakes began among ordinary 1964D pennies. A small number show repunched mint marks, or RPMs, because the D mint mark was applied manually to each die. Workers occasionally punched it slightly off, then tried to correct it. The result? A tiny shadow D just above, below, or beside the main one. These RPM errors are subtle, but once you see them, you can't unsee them. And collectors go crazy for them. Even in extra fine condition, a clean 1964D RPM can fetch $150 to $350, depending on clarity. But if you find one in red or red-brown and circulated condition, you're looking at $1,000, $2,000, even $5,000 in value. And that's just the beginning, because a few 1964D pennies have been discovered with dramatic die cracks, off-center strikes, and even missing letters in the inscriptions. These minting flaws can send values soaring into the five-figure range, especially when authenticated by PCGs or NGC. Now here's a twist very few people know. In 1964, the mint was preparing to switch coin compositions and designs, including the removal of silver from dimes and quarters. As part of that shift, test planchets and dies were being moved and reworked across facilities. That means transitional errors were possible. Coins struck on leftover 1963 planchets or on blanks meant for other denominations. A handful of these have been reported, and they've brought jaw-dropping prices. One example sold for over $25,000, even without dramatic errors. A beautiful extra fine 1964D penny tells a story all its own. The light wear across Lincoln's cheek, the smooth fields, and that subtle shine that only copper can give. It's a reminder of a time when pennies still had weight, warmth, and history in every detail. Collectors often say that these pre-1982 cents feel alive, and they're right. They're relics of an America that still made money from metal that mattered. The true thrill, though, lies in the hunt. Thousands of roll hunters still search through old bank boxes, jars, and estate collections looking for that perfect 1964D RPM or off-center strike. And the excitement never fades, because one lucky find could mean the difference between an ordinary coin and an auction headline. In 2017, one such coin, a 1964D with a clear double-punched mint mark, an almost perfect red luster, sold for nearly $7,000 for a 1-cent piece. That's the magic of the Lincoln penny. It proves that even the humblest coin can carry a hidden story, a forgotten error, and a value that defies belief. So, if you come across a 1964D penny in your collection, take your time. Use a magnifier, check the mint mark closely, and study the details around Lincoln's ear, beard, and the lettering. Because the difference between a penny and a payday might just be a second D hiding in plain sight. Next up, we head toward the late 70s. 1978, a year when disco ruled the airwaves, gasoline lines stretched for blocks, and the US Mint was cranking out billions of coins for a restless economy. But in the middle of all that copper, a few special Lincoln pennies rolled off the Denver presses, carrying something extraordinary, subtle, rare, and worth far more than their face value. This is the story of the 1978D Lincoln cent, a coin that hides its secrets beneath decades of ordinary wear. At first glance, You might think you've seen this penny 1,000 times before. The smooth portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the strong, "In God We Trust" motto, and the familiar D under the date tell you it was born in Denver. The reverse features the stately Lincoln Memorial, centered and bold. But look closer, because the seemingly ordinary coin has fooled millions. The 1978D penny is one of those coins where rarity hides in the smallest details, tiny imperfections that slipped through unnoticed. During the minting process, during the late 1970s, the mint was producing pennies at a record pace. Dies were reused and repolished far more often than normal. That meant that any tiny mistake, a repunched mint mark, a small die crack, or a double strike could create a collectible treasure that only sharp-eyed enthusiasts would ever recognize. The most sought-after variety from this year is the 1978D RPM, or repunched mint mark, because the D was still hand-punched into the die at that time. A mint worker could slightly misplace it, creating a faint shadow D right above or beside the main one. Some of these are bold, with two clear mint marks overlapping each other. And when you find one that obvious, that's when the magic happens. A fine or extra fine 1978D RPM can easily fetch $150 to $300, while a red uncirculated example glowing with its original copper shine can reach $1,000 or more. The rarest ones, with perfect doubling and sharp detail, have sold for over $3,000 at auction. And if you happen to find one with an off-center strike, a clipped planchet, or a die crack running through the design, you could be looking at $5,000 to $15,000, depending on the error's severity and overall condition. In extra fine condition, this coin still carries beauty and history. You'll notice light wear across Lincoln's jaw, cheek, and coat, but the details remain crisp, the color deep and even. Collectors love these natural copper tones because they tell a story. They're not mint fresh, but they've survived 4 decades of circulation without losing their dignity. That's what makes an extra fine coin special. It has character. Now, here's a fascinating fact. Some 1978D pennies were accidentally struck with die chips inside the Lincoln Memorial design on the reverse. These small, raised blobs of metal often appearing between the columns are known as cuds or die breaks. Depending on their size and position, they can make your penny stand out dramatically. Some of these have sold for hundreds, even thousands, especially when authenticated as genuine mint errors. And then there's the rarest of them all, the double-struck 1978D penny. Only a few are known, but one spectacular example with the clear second strike overlapping the first sold for over $20,000. A coin that started its life worth a cent, now worth more than a brand new car, simply because of one mechanical misstep. Imagine finding one of these treasures in your old change jar. A little brown penny from 1978 that's been hiding quietly for years. You tilt it under the light, and suddenly you spot it. That faint second D, that odd mark between the columns, that tiny clue that says this coin is anything but ordinary. Your heart skips a beat and you realize, this is what makes coin collecting so addictive. The thrill of discovery, the joy of history, and the shock of value all rolled into one. Even though the 1978D doesn't get as much fame as some earlier Lincoln cents, serious collectors know it's a sleeper, a coin that's quietly climbing in desirability, especially now, as copper pennies vanish from circulation. Every vintage piece from the 1970s becomes more precious with time. So before you toss your old pennies into a Coinstar machine, stop for a second. Look closely at the 1978DS. Check the mint mark, study the details, and remember, one little letter could make all the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and one worth thousands. Next up, we jump into the 21st century. The year 2002. The world had changed. Technology was booming, and many collectors thought the era of rare pennies was long gone. But the US Mint still had surprises waiting. Among the millions of modern zinc Lincoln cents struck that year, a few emerged with minting errors so wild, so unexpected, that they reignited the excitement of penny hunting all over again. At first glance, the 2002 Lincoln penny doesn't look like anything special. By then, The coin's composition had long since changed, no more solid copper, but a zinc core coated with a thin layer of copper, giving it that same familiar color, but a very different weight. Lincoln's portrait still stares proudly to the right, "In God We Trust" above his head, "Liberty" to the left, and the date, 2002, to the right. The reverse still displays the Lincoln Memorial, a design that had lasted nearly 50 years. But beneath that familiar face hides one of the most surprising modern errors in U.S. coinage: the 2002 double die and off-metal error pennies. During the early 2000s, the mint used high-speed presses to produce billions of coins per year, and while their quality control was excellent, no system is perfect. A few rare 2002 pennies left the mint with dramatic double designs, particularly on Liberty, "In God We Trust," and even the date. Collectors who've seen them describe thick, rounded doubling that almost looks 3D, bold enough to see without a magnifier. When authenticated by PCGs or NGC, these errors can bring $1,500 to $3,000 in circulated condition, and in uncirculated red condition, values can jump past 10,000. But the real showstopper comes from the handful of 2002 Lincoln cent struck on wrong planchets, meaning the blank coin used was meant for another denomination. Some were struck on dime planchets, others on foreign blanks used for overseas contracts. One spectacular example, struck on a thin dime planchet, weighed less than 2.5 grams and sold for over $18,000 at auction. Imagine that: a coin smaller and lighter than a normal penny, yet worth more than a brand new car. Even in extra fine condition, your 2002 penny can hold surprises. Light wear across Lincoln's cheek and jawline, a soft sheen on the fields, and no major scratches. That's exactly the kind of detail collectors love. And if you happen to find even the slightest hint of a die crack, a misaligned rim, or that famous doubling on Liberty, you may be looking at a serious treasure hiding in plain sight. Now, here's what makes 2002 pennies fascinating. This was one of the last full production years of the Lincoln Memorial design before the mint began preparing for the Lincoln Bicentennial series in 2009. That means errors and die varieties from this era are now considered transitional and historically significant, bridging the end of one design and the beginning of another. Savvy collectors are snapping them up, knowing that in another decade, these coins could be worth far more than they are today. The 2002D Mintmark variety from Denver is also worth watching. A few examples have shown signs of die deterioration, doubling that mimic real double dies, thickening around the letters and numbers that can trick even experienced eyes. If you think you've found one, always check with a reputable grading service. The real ones with clear, rounded doubling can be worth thousands. And then there's the off-center 2002 penny, one of the most dramatic modern errors. When the coin blank isn't properly seated in the press, part of the design lands off to one side, leaving a crescent-shaped blank area. The more off-center it is, up to about 50%, the higher the value. Some of these have sold for $5,000 to $12,000, depending on how cleanly the date and mint mark appear. Think about that for a second. A modern penny from 2002, a coin younger than most cell phones, carrying a value in the thousands simply because of one imperfect strike. It's proof that even in today's machine-perfect world, human error still has a way of creating magic. Collectors often overlook the modern years, assuming newer coins can't be valuable. But as we've seen time and again, that's a costly mistake. Hidden among the billions of ordinary cents are the rare exceptions, the ones with doubling, off-metal strikes, or incomplete plating that turn a 1-cent coin into a small fortune. So, if you have a 2002 Lincoln penny, especially one from Denver, take a close look under bright light. Examine the lettering, the date, and the edges. You just might discover one of the most valuable modern mint errors still circulating today. And now, coin collectors, hold on to your seats, because we're stepping back to a year that hides one of the most unexpected Lincoln penny surprises in modern history: 1979, and specifically, the 1979D Lincoln cent struck in Denver. At first glance, It seems like just another ordinary late 70s penny, copper-colored, common, and easy to dismiss. But once you take a closer look, things start to get interesting. The 1979D penny is one of those rare examples where a normal-looking coin can hold shocking secrets, and where condition, subtle details, and minting quirks can turn a pocket change penny into a collector's dream. In extra fine condition, your 1979D penny shows the kind of gentle wear that comes only from honest circulation. Lincoln's cheek and jawline are smooth but still defined, the lettering crisp, the date clear, and the fields those flat areas around the design retain that soft reddish-brown glow that collectors love. It's the kind of coin that whispers history, carrying the warmth of age without losing its charm. But here's where things take a wild turn. 1979 was a turbulent year for the U.S. Mint. Striking pressures, die polishing, and planchet preparation often led to a flurry of small but significant mint errors. Some of these mistakes created extremely valuable varieties, including double dies, die cracks, filled mint marks, and even off-metal errors that today command jaw-dropping prices. Among the most famous is the 1979D Lincoln penny struck on a dime planchet. Imagine holding a coin smaller, thinner, and lighter than a normal cent, but bearing Lincoln's design perfectly centered. That's the kind of rarity that turns heads at auctions. One such coin, verified and graded by PCGs, sold for an astonishing $22,000. Yes, a 1-cent coin smaller than a dime, lighter than a nickel, bringing in over $20,000. Another extraordinary find came from the 1979D double die obverse varieties. Though not as dramatic as the legendary 1955 or 1969s, these coins still display clear doubling on the date and lettering, especially around Liberty and In God We Trust. In extra fine condition, they can bring anywhere from $800 to $1,500, but in uncirculated red condition, the kind of luster that looks like it was minted yesterday, values can skyrocket past $10,000. And if you're one of the lucky few to stumble upon a broad strike or off-center strike 1979D penny, you might want to sit down before you check the prices. Broad-struck coins where the retaining collar fails, allowing the metal to spread out beyond its normal rim, have sold for $3,000 to $5,000 depending on centering. But the true stars are the off-center 1979Ds that still show a visible date and mint mark. One example, nearly 40% off-center, but perfectly displaying 1979D, sold for a shocking $12,600. Now, here's something even more fascinating. The Denver Mint in 1979 used several master hubs and working dies that year, some of which began to show die deterioration, doubling that worn, fuzzy look around the letters that can easily be mistaken for a real double die. Most are worthless, but a few have been confirmed as genuine double dies, making careful inspection essential. Collectors love these subtle varieties because they tell the story of a mint struggling to maintain perfection at mass production scale. What makes the 1979D truly special isn't just its age or errors, it's that it bridges two eras of American coinage. It's one of the last full copper Lincoln cents, composed of 95% copper, just before the U.S. Mint switched to zinc-coated planchets in 1982. That alone makes every well-preserved 1979 penny a tangible piece of pre-zinc American history. Even without errors, a 1979D in pristine red uncirculated condition can sell for $2,000 to $3,000, simply because of its luster, eye appeal, and growing scarcity of high-grade examples. And in a world where metal prices and collector demand keep rising, these pre-1982 copper coins are quietly becoming the new gold of penny collecting. So, if you have a 1979D Lincoln penny sitting in a drawer, take another look. Check for a smaller size, lighter weight, doubled lettering, or unusual thickness signs of an off-metal strike. Examine the date and mint mark under magnification. The tiniest detail could reveal a fortune hidden in plain sight. And now, we arrive at the final coin in this extraordinary lineup, one that looks so ordinary, so dark and worn, that most people wouldn't give it a second glance. But that would be a mistake. A big one. Because this coin, the 1978 Lincoln penny, especially one with the mysterious black shade and fine condition, might just be the hidden treasure that could take your breath away. At first glance, it seems humble. The blackened surface gives it an aged, almost burnt appearance, a color that tells a story of decades of circulation. But here's the twist: that dark tone might not just be the result of age or dirt. In some cases, it can point to something much more fascinating, a minting anomaly or chemical transformation that makes certain 1978 pennies one of a kind. Let's start with the basics. The 1978 Lincoln cent was struck in 95% copper, one of the last full copper issues before the 1980 to zinc transition. This alone gives it lasting value, especially as copper prices rise. But the Denver Mint and Philadelphia Mint both produced millions that year, and as machines wore down, small imperfections began to appear. Some of these mistakes created coins unlike any others. Coins that today can be worth thousands. Now, about that black color, most people assume it means damage, exposure to heat, fire, or chemicals. But a small number of these dark-toned coins were actually improperly annealed planchets. That means the copper blanks were overheated during production, giving them a deep, chocolate brown or black appearance right out of the mint presses. These rare planchet errors are extremely collectible and can command $5,000 to $8,000. If authenticated and in solid, fine to extra fine condition. But that's not the only mystery hiding in the 1978 penny. Some coins from this year were struck on foreign planchets, leftover blanks intended for other countries' coinage that accidentally slipped into the Lincoln cent production line. When discovered, these coins shocked collectors because they were lighter or darker than normal and produced a different ring when dropped on a hard surface. One such coin, 1978 penny, struck on a foreign bronze planchet, sold for an unbelievable $35,000 at auction. Now, let's talk about one of the most dramatic error types found in 1978, the off-center strike. Imagine a coin where Lincoln's face is only halfway visible, the rest blank metal. It looks bizarre, but that's exactly what makes collectors go wild. A clean, off-center strike showing the full date can bring $6,000 to $10,000. Depending on condition, there's also the 1978D double die obverse, one of those varieties that can easily slip under the radar. Look closely at the date, especially the 7 and 8, or the word Liberty. Genuine doubling creates thick, rounded outlines that you can see even without magnification. In circulated condition, these can reach $2,500, while mint state examples can push $12,000 or more. Now, let's focus back on your coin fine condition. Dark black tone. You can still make out Lincoln's strong profile, his eye clear, and the edges softly worn but readable. The reverse, the Lincoln Memorial, may have flattened steps and faint lettering, but the history remains. That deep black patina gives it an antique, mysterious look that collectors sometimes call black beauty. And here's the thing: if that coloration happened naturally or during the minting process, rather than from environmental damage, it can raise the value dramatically. Collectors have reported improperly annealed 1978 pennies selling for $8,000 to $15,000, depending on how well the color and details are preserved. Even a dark-toned normal penny can hold extra interest simply because it stands out. The contrast, the age, the mystery of how it became what it is. What makes this coin truly emotional is that it represents the end of an era. The late 70s were the last calm years before the massive changes of the 1980s, before zinc, before the memorial design faded, before technology took over minting. Each 1978 copper penny, especially those with unique colors or subtle errors, is a tiny time capsule from the last breath of old-school American craftsmanship. So, the next time you see a dark, almost black Lincoln penny from 1978, don't toss it aside. Hold it to the light. Feel the history, the weight of real copper, and the quiet power of a coin that survived nearly half a century. Because sometimes, the coins that look the most ordinary are the ones that change everything. And that brings us to the end of this incredible journey through 8 ultra-rare Abraham Lincoln pennies that could be worth a fortune. From shocking errors to forgotten designs, each coin tells a story of America, of craftsmanship, and of hidden treasures still waiting to be found in your pocket change. So, before you spend that next penny, take one last look, because it might not just be worth 1 cent. It could be worth your retirement. Thank you for watching us Mint Mysteries. If you love discovering hidden gems and unbelievable coin stories, make sure to subscribe, tap the bell icon, and join our growing community of passionate collectors. Who knows? The next rare coin might just be sitting in your own pocket right now.